Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Constantine from the Washington Times. And for America, he is David Bozell. Hi, David. How are you?
Tim, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You know,
Great.
I was in the Middle East like a week or 10 days after October 7th.
And you're back.
I am back. I was back. I was there again recently, but right after the attack that started this whole Gaza thing, the Israelis had not yet responded on the ground when I was there. But there was a young woman who was reporting for Egyptian television, that was very upset, and in her words, at the savage conditions that were being put forth at that time. Again, no ground war yet.
Okay.
She was concerned because internet had been cut from Gaza.
Okay.
I say that because I think particularly people of a certain age, obviously we all use the internet, but people of a certain age think that the internet is like water or sewer services, that it is an absolute must. The reason I say all of that is in Washington this week and next week, they are discussing TikTok.
Right.
Whether or not to allow this social media thing to go forward in its current form and current ownership. And I wanted to get feedback from you because I think if you're below a certain age, oh my gosh, it's like they're going to cut off oxygen if you cut off TikTok. Right. What do you think?
Well, some of those kids need to go outside and touch some grass instead of getting on their phones every single day. Look, for the record, I'm not on TikTok. It kind of reminds me of the old Stonewall Jackson quote about why he didn't take up smoking. He'd be afraid he would like it too much. It's obviously addictive. It's got 150 million U.S. users. People love it, but it's well documented. It's owned by the CCP. They're using it to spy on Americans. It's not just a balloon in the sky, folks. It's right here in your pocket.
Here's my question: is sometimes human nature doesn't matter if you're American, if you're Chinese, if you're Russian. You need a boogeyman. Yeah. There's got to be a bad guy. Somebody is going to hurt us. It's just the way human nature is. And I look at TikTok and I look at the information that they gather, and I don't use TikTok either. But if I did, I don't care. Right. What information do they have from me that is so dangerous? I understand perhaps the government should not allow it on government phones, or if that's a concern. But if the 14-year-old is texting his buddy or sending pictures or sending messages on TikTok, reading memes, why do I care? Maybe I'm just using up China's time trying to sift through what all these crazy American kids are doing instead of doing something that could actually be harmful.
Fair point.
I don't understand.
Fair point. If the Chinese want to waste their time watching all their kids watch themselves, it's a fair point. But look, as when you're charged with the national defense of the nation, and you've identified China as a foreign adversary, and they've got a spying pipeline into your homes, I think the United States Congress is saying no mas.
I feel an obligation to put on a show for them. If they're going to peek into my house right now, they're going to be bored out of their mind.
All that said, I don't think this gets past Chuck Schumer in the Senate. I really don't. I think the lobbying effort on TikTok is going to be successful there. There's less numbers that they have to contend with than in the House. The House is more of a populist body anyway, so this is something that maybe not the left's base, but certainly the right-wing's base has been asking for some action on this national security front and to get rid of TikTok. I mean, Donald Trump called for TikTok's ban while he was president. Now he's since gone back on that. Kind of strange. Money talks. However, let's just give him a little bit of a grace period and say, well, he's had a road to Damascus conversion and he's looked in between the lines and maybe it's not so bad. Okay, I'll perhaps give him that. However, I think the bill is narrowly tailored enough and correct in its mission that we don't want the Chinese government spying on Americans, particularly kids. Now, where I think it doesn't go far enough, Tim, and this is why I wish Congress would get its act together, and the Democrats kind of are ahead of Republicans on this, is the issue of privacy. If I were Congress, I would be demanding, not just TikTok, every single social media company that there is to stop surveillance advertising of any user under the age of 18.
If I stop surveillance advertising for everybody. I don't say 18, because you talk about collection of data. And it's not just TikTok, it's Snap, it's Instagram, it's Facebook, and each of those has their own audience. I would be much more worried if the Chinese were collecting from Facebook, whose average age is middle age and up, then perhaps they have data that is of interest. I just can't imagine the Chinese are culling that much important information from the TikTok crowd. I can't get my hands around it. So I'm with you 100%. I don't care about TikTok. I don't think the fact that the Chinese are involved, it's a Chinese company who answers to the Chinese government, I don't care. I really think that's just a false, I go back to the 1950s when communism in Hollywood, and it got so far out of hand that the worry was, they're using Hollywood to try to take over the country, and it got crazy. And looking back, you look at it and think, that was crazy. I feel like we're on that path now with TikTok. I think the bigger picture that you've described is the accurate one, and that is all this collection of data, whether it's Chinese or American-owned or anybody else, is that okay? Are most people okay with? I think most people don't realize what's going on. Would they be okay if they realized the extent to which your daily habits are recorded? And it's not just the websites that you visit, it's not just the communication you have in those applications, it's what you talk about, it's picking up verbal cues, it's what it sees when your camera is on, it picks all of it up. And so I think there should be some governance of collection of data, but that should be to all systems. I don't care specifically.
Well, there was a study that came out that if you have an electronic device at like 2 years old, by the time you get to 10, the device has collected 13 million pieces of data on that child. I mean, you and I are old enough to remember that the only way that a company could advertise to a kid was basically on Saturday morning cartoons, because they knew that's who was watching.
Honeycomb's big.
Right. Right. And this is, and so I am all for, I wish the Republicans would get their acts together on this issue of privacy, because the Democrats are ahead of the game. I mean, there's a terrific Netflix documentary that I would recommend everyone watch called The Social Dilemma. It's about 5 years old now. But the Democrats have marshaled behind this premise that these social media companies are spying on all of us. Now, I'm willing to make exceptions because, at 18, because let's put in some opt-in procedures, that kind of thing. You're old enough to go to war. Maybe you're old enough to have your data collected, that kind of premise. But kids under the age of high school kids, everybody, all these kids, none of these companies should be collecting a child's data for the purposes of profit.
Final note on it. You said you think Chuck Schumer and crew in the Senate will turn this down. How close are we on that? Because it seems wildly popular in Washington, not in the masses. When I talk to my son, when I talk to young people, I hate using that term because that means I'm old people. But when I talk to people of a certain age, then they want TikTok. They want to keep TikTok. They use it regularly. You mentioned the number 150 million users. So clearly half of America likes this. In Washington, is this the only place it's unpopular? And is it possible it will squeak through on the Senate? Right
now, Chuck Schumer is feverishly pulling this politically. If he lets this through and Biden signs it, as he's promised to do, who does the country blame? I mean, the White House is using TikTok every single day, multiple times a day, to get its campaign message out. And the Biden campaign is doing that as well. I mean, it's the best platform for Biden, incidentally, because it keeps him to like 10 seconds or less, and he really can't botch anything under 10 seconds. So if the Senate lets this go through and Biden signs it, and there's a massive uproar from the United States voter, well, who do they blame? Right? Do they blame the guy who signed it, or do they blame the Republican majority who started this? That's what I think right now Chuck Schumer and his political operation are trying to figure out.
David Bozell, thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, sir.
For America, I'm Tim Constantine from the Washington Times.